That's okay. Hi, everyone. We are live at the moment. We're going to wait a few minutes. The people are just starting to get here at 6:30, a little after. So give us about 10, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into the quick presentation and go through some slides and then answer some questions right after that. So stay tuned. 10 minutes. Okay. Are we live? Is it working? Boy, do we have a packed room here today. Thank you guys all for coming. It's going to take me several minutes to count. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. The whole idea of this little get-together here, little town hall, is I'd love to give just a quick synopsis of Measure Q. It's a Lompoc measure that's on the ballot. Everyone should have received a ballot by now. As you know, the recall election's on one side, and if you flip it over, everyone that's a citizen here within the borders of Lompoc has an option to...
Really loud.
Is it really loud? Okay, hang tight. Don't be shy. There's not many seats left, but if you find one close, I promise I'll be nice. How does that sound? Is that a little bit better on the volume? If you're listening out there live, give us a thumbs up or any comments, some feedback if you can hear it or you can't. Okay, great. So again, as I was saying, the whole idea of this little get-together in Town Hall is I just wanted to, reintroduce Measure Q, make sure everyone understand what it's about, what it's for, who's paying for it, how it can be helpful, and some of those details. So again, it's on the back side of your ballot. Everyone should have received it by now in the mail. Hopefully if you have voted, you've voted yes on Measure Q. But Measure Q, for those that are completely oblivious and have no clue what's happening, Measure Q is an update to our cannabis ordinance. And it is a shift from a very small fee structure on cannabis manufacturing and distribution, changing it from $15,000 up to $2 million in profit, and then only $30,000 for anything over $2 million, to a fair, modest, tiered tax system. So it starts at half of 1% and works its way up to 2.5%. For someone in the manufacturing industry of cannabis to pay 2.5%, they're going to have to gross over $55 million a year. So from my perspective, it's a pretty fair tax. I'm very proud of this council. It was not a divisive discussion. There was a lot of input and feedback, but we were able to garner a 5-0 vote. Every single person at the city council agreed that this is an emergency. We have some fiscal issues. We're behind on several items. And they thought, hey, this seems fair and modest. And the timeline for when to implement it was fair to everyone. So we were able to declare the emergency a couple months ago and was able to get it on this special election ballot. So if we are fortunate enough to hopefully get this passed, we would start collecting revenue, additional revenue, in April of next year. So that's right around the corner. If I'm sorry? Sure. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I don't want to overwhelm you guys with lots of details, but the devil sometimes is in the details. So bear with me. We're going to go through a couple quick slides. So hopefully this answers some quick questions. And as soon as I get through this, I'd love to take a couple of questions and make sure that we're all on the same page with this item here. So let me know when the first slide is ready to go. Okay, so as we had already mentioned, this is a tax that's only on manufacturing and distribution. To be very, very clear, this is not on dispensaries. This does not change any taxes for dispensaries. Dispensaries up to this point have been paying a very fair 6% tax, which has actually helped us. It's helped our revenue. Last year, we pulled in little over $1.5 million just from dispensaries, and that's very, very helpful. We need that help. So thank you to dispensaries. They really stepped up and have been paying. Let's see, the difference, let's see, I don't want to read this, but so here's the issue. So dispensaries, whether they like it or not, have to pay that 6%. In manufacturing, as I mentioned, up to $2 million, the only tax, and there's not really a tax, it's been a fee, it's been a flat fee of $15,000 a year. So the issue with that, as you can imagine, if you just do a little bit of math, is it's a completely different tax rate if you believe, as a lot of people have told me, that a fee is essentially a tax. So if it's a $15,000 a year to a $2 million gross revenue entity, and then only $30,000 for anybody making over $2 million, that's a really low tax. The issue is that $30,000 rate does not change if they hit $25 million or $50 million or $100 million. At the end of it, if they're making $50 million and paying $30,000 a year, do the math. That works out to be like a 0.03% tax compared to 6% for dispensaries. So from my perspective, that's a little bit of an inequity. And for a city that is starved for resources, this is kind of that low-hanging fruit. This isn't an overwhelmingly large tax, but from my estimation, I think it's pretty fair. Let's see, where are we at? Say that again? I'm not reading this. Okay. So we already covered dispensaries paying their 6%. Let's see. $1.5 million came in. That's amazing. Kind of walked through, up to $100 million. They're still just paying that $30,000 there. So on, let's see, where's those numbers at? Yes, just for reference, just to drive this home. So let's all imagine that we had $25 million that we made. Dispensaries making $25 million is going to pay $1.5 million to the city of Lompoc. So collectively, the dispensaries have sold $25 million worth of marijuana product, cannabis product here in town, and have paid in this last year $1.5 million. For that, number 13, I think we're on the same one. So here's the difference. On manufacturers making that $25 million, paying their $30,000 once a year, that works out to a 0.12% tax. So that's a huge difference between those two things. The difference too is that, let's remember, dispensaries and their tax, that's on the back of consumers. That's on customers walking in and paying they tax. On manufacturing and distribution, they might adjust those prices, but if ultimately that is the sale of the product throughout the state and potentially multiple states, and what they report to the state as their gross revenue, that's the same number that we'll say, okay, within the city of Lompoc, we're asking you to pay that 0.5 or 1 or 1.5, 2 or 2.5%. Does that make sense to everyone? Did I beat a dead horse with that one? Is it? I don't mean to. Okay, so let's see. After that, Michelle, am I on the same? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Is there any questions online from anyone about that stuff? So conservatively, so the question was asked, what do we think that this will generate out of the gates to the city? So conservatively, they're estimating to start with about $1.2 million. That's a low estimate from where I'm coming from. We've got some amazing businesses, manufacturing, some big players are here already in Lompoc, and we've also got some more coming in. Even after they got wind of the tax being considered and hopefully passed, that movement is still happening. They're headed this direction. So let's talk about why would we even need to adjust revenue? What is the problem? Why do we need to get more money? Is it just to give everyone raises, or is it something, what is the point? Do we really need the money? So I thought just as an example, and I don't mean to complicate this, but I took one entity. I took our police department. One of our top concerns within Lompoc from many, many citizens that I've talked to and that have come to city council is their issues with public safety and not feeling safe within our community. As many of you know, this week we had a couple more shootings yesterday. That brought our number to 52 shootings this year. We've already had 2 homicides this year. So as a lot of people know, they've been stressed. They've been worried about going outside or sending their kids outside or going to the park or even walking to school. Kids have been concerned about safety. So I thought I would just give us a little bit of a, and again, I don't mean to make this divisive or political at all, but I thought I'd dig back into history and to see maybe 10 years ago what we used to do. For example, the police department, what did we have in terms of staffing, taking care of some of our crime issues and some of those challenges that have popped up. So, Michelle, let's go to slide number 17. Slide number 17. So this is and if anyone's curious, please message me or email me, and I will send you the PDF police report, the annual report from 2011. I've got those PDFs from 07 to 2011, and we have data, and we have numbers that go all the way back to 02. But for this one, I thought 10 years made sense. So where were we 10 years ago as a police department? And we're not even bringing up the fire department. We're not bringing up a lot of other challenges that we have, just the police department. So as you'll notice, in 2011, we had 51 sworn officers. Now, I'll be the first to say that just to have police officers is not always the perfect fix. We've got specialized challenges here. We need a lot of help when it comes to addiction issues and mental health, and we've got to figure out where that sweet spot is to bring our public safety element back with hopefully a lot more services to the human issues that we're dealing with in our community, including homelessness. But just as a reference, so 10 years ago, 51 sworn officers. In the past 4 years, we allowed that number to get all the way down to 33 sworn officers. 33. So if I've got 51, I've got 33, do the math. That's basically a third of the resources that our city is dependent on to keep them safe, or to go after the criminal element, or to go after the illegal drug trade when we're trying to bring in the legal cannabis trade here. So we lost a lot. We are building back. We're getting close to 41 or 42, but the issue is all of the things that we lost. What does that mean when we lose people? Well, you can't continue to provide the same level of service. Well, I've heard that before. Maybe they just need to work harder, and they need to quit complaining. They just need to pony up and get this done. Well, I thought, well, let's go through some of the things that we lost as a result of those numbers going down, and then we'll talk about how and why would we lose them in the first place. So let's go to, Michelle, if you would, let's go to slide number 18. Is that 18? 18. Okay, so in 2011, these were a few of our services. We had our patrol operations, we had a traffic officer, we had canine patrol, we had our investigations section, which included the gang and narcotics enforcement team, which was known as GNET, and a few other things. So let's go to the next slide. As a result of cuts and not maintaining our revenue and keeping up and staying competitive with our neighbors that pay a little bit more, that have added benefits to their public safety sector, this is what went away. So we lost, let's see, what did we lose there, Michelle? We lost our traffic element. We lost our gang and narcotics unit. What are some of the biggest issues we've been facing in our community? Those have been gang issues. We used to be able to be a little bit more proactive with those things. Yes, some people will say, well, we had a gang injunction. I'd be happy to talk about that. That's not reality anymore. Courts have stepped up and said, you're not going to go after people that don't look like me by just saying, we have an injunction, and if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you get arrested too. A lot of people are fans of that. That's okay, but the courts are not letting us have that same leeway that we had in the past. So that's not really an option. So we lost a gang and drug enforcement unit, which was kind of a proactive element in our town, able to get ahead of the curve on some of these issues. And now that it's gone, all we have left is regular patrol officers to react when something goes wrong. And by then, it's usually a little too late. So it's no surprise to me that we've seen an increase, whether it's homicides or assaults. Many different crimes have gone through the roof. Car thefts, oh my goodness, we've got some numbers on that here too. So let's go to the next one, Michelle. Let's go to slide number 20. Slide number 20. And this is prevention and intervention, which is something that any city would be hopeful that you would have within your public safety element. There would be a focus, a conscious focus on intervention and prevention. So this is what we had. We used to have a gang resistance education and training. We had school resource officers. A lot of people don't know that went away. We had a police activities league, the POW. We had graffiti eradication team, gang injunction at the time. We've talked about that for a second. Crimes against women, investigation and advocacy, Crime-free multi-housing program, that was the officers or the police department getting involved in like neighborhood watch and helping the community build a little bit of a networking structure to address some of these issues. We had a community-oriented policing program and a volunteer unit. All right, let's go to the next slide and see what we were able to, oh my goodness, lots of red lines there. So as you can see, everything that's redlined there has gone away. And it's gone away for a couple of reasons. We didn't have the resources to stay competitive. We couldn't keep up with the neighbors that poached a lot of officers from us because they paid better. And we haven't always treated our public safety element here with the respect that they often deserve. So again, when people are frustrated and complaining, and I completely understand, and you're saying, why aren't we taking care of this? Or why aren't we being more proactive? It comes down to what we haven't kept up for and what we haven't paid for. So those are the things that we've lost. Michelle, let's go to slide number 21. Oh, I'm sorry, slide 22. So community programs. Is it necessary? I don't know. Let's just keep the peace. But I believe in community programs. I believe in outreach. I believe in community policing. Let's see. So community programs we used to have, we had the Lompoc Citizens Police Academy. We had police explorers. If you're born and raised like I was in Lompoc, when you were a little kid, you remember the police explorers was kind of a cool thing. They'd have 20 people learn how to stand really straight and line out next to the police department, and they wanted. So was that saving our community? No, but it showed that we had a conscious investment in the youth of our community. We're trying to make a dent in some of those issues, and all of that now has gone away. So, let's see, we had the Lompoc Police Beat television program. I don't know if that was great or not, I'd have to go back. But we had Lompoc Junior Police Camp, and we had a national night out, some things that young people could look forward to in our town. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What were we able to keep out of that? Everything I just listed is gone. We don't have that anymore. And to me, that's frustrating because this is vital to us having a chance to make inroads within the community before something spirals out of control. We haven't kept up with that, and it's just sad to me to see that go away. Can we bring that back tomorrow? No, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. But all of these things in the past took resources. They came out of the general fund. We did afford it. We made conscious choices to allocate that funding to those things. The other thing I didn't really mention in here is the police department also had a vibrant volunteer element. And volunteers are incredibly important because they don't cost the city a lot of money. It costs the city a little bit to manage it and go through the administrative part of that. But also, thanks to COVID, we don't have that as a resource here, and that's something that we'd hope to bring back as well. So I don't mean to bore you with all this, but I just wanted you to know that these are some of the challenges that we're facing in our community. This is stuff that we already showed that we could afford in our past. This isn't something that we're striving for that we've never experienced. This is something we used to do. So with all respect, I get tired of hearing, well, Lompoc only makes, per capita, we only make this much money per person. We're not richer or poorer than we used to be, except for inflation a long time ago, but we lost all of these services. So we did pony up and take care of business before, and we haven't been able to do that now. And in all transparency, a lot of people know we took a big hit with CalPERS. Pensions, paying that retirement, it's taking a big chunk of that revenue. Fortunately, over the last couple of years, we were able to pass Measure I, which is the first sales tax, 1 cent sales tax to the city, and that's helped us. That's brought in over $5 million a year to the city. That's great. But we have a massive hole. We have capital improvement projects that we haven't taken care of, and a lot of other issues that we've not really been paying for. And that's not the fault of anyone that's just behind me in city council. These are choices over decades of not saying, let's keep the money here, let's save it and make sure that we have it in reserves to take care of business. And what saddens me is that as a result of us going through, the 2008 crash and a lot of those financial challenges that we went through, we've just lost the ability to provide a decent quality of life to people in Lompoc. And we have to do a better job at that. So I'm not here to simply say that Measure Q will fix all of those things, but if you can at least appreciate some of the things that we definitely used to offer our community. We definitely, doesn't mean we were perfect. We had a lot of issues, but we tried. And right now, we're kind of up against it because we don't have those same resources. I had an opportunity to dig in on some of these things within public safety. And I appreciate every single police officer that we have that's doing their due diligence to do the best that they can. But a lot of our patrol officers, more than a couple, are coming in with less than 3 years of experience. That's not a problem. The only issue is that in the past 4 or 5 years, we lost a tremendous amount of experience within 4 or 5 officers lateraling to a different department, taking with it 10, 15, 20 years of understanding about the challenges within our community, taking with them the knowledge of who to talk to and how to understand that neighborhood. So I'm happy for anyone that wants to, step up and be a police officer in Lompoc, but I just want people to know we've lost a lot of experience. And the reason that we lost a lot of experience is that we did not stay competitive in paying them a competitive rate. Now, there are people who will say, well, Lompoc just can't afford that. Well, we've done it before. We had 51 sworn. We were able to attract people, retain people, sustain them being here, and then we lost it. So as an example of how challenging it can be for a little city like Lompoc, to maintain and keep people working for us, I want to give you an example of something. So Michelle, if you'll give me, if we can go to slide number 24. This just crossed this popped into my email today. Right now, this is as of August 2021. This is what you get if you're a police officer and you're qualified and you want a lateral to the Santa Maria Police Department. This is what they're teasing you with to try to get you to come work for them. All right, $20,000 hiring incentive, 10 grand at the time of hire, 5 grand upon completion, successful completion of FTP, 5,000 upon successful completion of probation. So within 1 year, it's 20 grand. They get a $2,500 relocation bonus. They get credit for full years of service with most recent agency for vacation accrual purposes. Their PERS retirement percentage is 3% at 55. Ours is not. They have a 410 plan for sworn personnel, and they're preloaded. It's almost like they're a credit card, I guess, but they're preloaded with 80 hours of vacation time upon hire. Wow. I'm in the wrong career, I think. And then they're also preloaded with 80 hours of sick time upon hire. So the reason I'm bringing that up is not to say, Santa Maria versus us, but please, let's be real about this. How can I guarantee this community, or how can anyone leading this community guarantee that we can maintain and stay competitive with our public safety element when we are nowhere close in any of those contexts to being competitive? What frightens me is as word gets out that other cities are deciding it's really hard to get an officer, we have to do something. We have to invest in that. We have to create incentives. We don't have any plan for that. We don't have any resources for that. And that scares me because just when we're starting to turn the corner a little bit with our public safety element, just when we're starting to get back up over 40 officers sworn, still a long way from where we have been in the past. It scares me because as an officer here, they can have good intentions and a great heart and love this community, but numbers like this will tempt anyone to go somewhere else and work for a department that pays them better. So I know, and everyone here knows, that we cannot compete with this anytime soon. But somehow, some way, we have to wrap our head around how the world is changing around us, how it's harder and harder to get employees and to keep employees. And I just submit that instead of us continually complaining that they should just stop complaining, they make enough, Lompoc is a small town, it's not working out that way. We have devastated our public safety element. And I could have talked for another hour just about the fire department. Now, again, this is not the fault of any one person or one cause or one campaign. This is a result of many things going wrong within our control and outside of our control. But life keeps marching on. We have to provide public safety to our community. How are we going to do that? How are we going to stay competitive if we have not created a system that encourages or incentivizes someone to come to our department? But not just that, what encourages them to want to stay? So again, just as a sample, we're not Santa Maria, I understand that. But this is what can happen when we just say, no, we don't need to raise revenue, we need to cut somewhere else. We need to cut and cut. The results are in, folks. We took the head off of our public safety element, and we have been suffering as a result of those choices. Our call volume is the highest in the county. This isn't, the city of Solvang. This is Lompoc. We have a lot of calls here. We have like 1,700 calls a week. Fortunately, we've been able to build back and get some dispatchers in there so we can at least answer these calls and try our best to send out services. But we've got major issues past just employment. We've got issues with our fleet. The cars that our police officers drive in are an average of 15 plus years old. We have fire trucks that literally break down that we've got to tow back in because they're way past their life cycle. And we didn't make a plan to replace it. So my whole point with all of these items is this is why we looked at Measure Q, not as a fix-all. We have so many problems that Measure Q can't even help us fix all of them. But until we understand that revenue is one of the most important things that we have to focus on, because the cost of living is higher, inflation is higher, your gas prices are higher, milk prices are higher. Guess what? Medical services, insurance, all of those things for the city, that's a cost, and all of those things have gone up, and we have not increased our revenue. So I've said all of those things not to worry you, but to let you know that there is something that we can do. And again, it's not the perfect fix, but this can bring us a long way in terms of upping our revenue to give us options, to create some competitive incentives to keep or retain or to invite people to work for us. Measure Q, out of the gates, like I said, could bring in $1.2 million. If we're lucky and the industry thrives and makes even more money, that could be additional money to help us slowly dig ourselves out of these issues that we have. So, again, I've got so much more that I could say, and I've probably overwhelmed you with a lot of information, but I want you to know this is not a political issue. This isn't divisive. Again, we've got 5 people at council. All of us agreed this needs to happen. And we all agreed that it was an emergency, enough so that we said, let's get it on the ballot as soon as we possibly can. Let's get this in the hands of voters. Let's do our best to educate them. And let's see if we can get this passed. And then if we can, it's very simple. It's up to you all to keep us accountable, to make sure that the things, the goals, the stuff that we would like to bring back or provide in terms of public safety or just general quality of life, it's up to you guys to keep us accountable, to make sure that when that revenue comes in, that we allocate it properly. So again, I'm hopeful that this made some sort of sense to you all. There's a lot of different details, and I'd be happy to do my best to answer some questions. But I just wanted to implore you that if you're confused about Measure Q, this is not a tax on citizens. This is a tax on manufacturing corporations. It could be helpful, and let's remember the jobs that we brought in that industry, we should support them too. Meaning, if they're coming in here to work or they're working in the cannabis industry, they're probably raising a family. They're hoping to buy a home. They're hoping to keep their kids safe. They would love to have a town that celebrates itself and cleans up its act and is a great place to visit and stay and invite your family and all of those things. So there's no division here in terms of who should benefit or not. Lompoc can benefit when we get additional resources that allow us to stay competitive with our neighbors. I hope that makes sense, and that's where we're at with Measure Q. So don't forget, Measure Q ballots, you should already have them in the mail, hopefully. The deadline, the date to vote is September 14th. That's coming up pretty soon. And I just looked at my ballot today, and there's the front page, the recall, and all the names and all that stuff, but fortunately down at the bottom it says, flip it over for the Lompoc measure. So please, please, vote. Just vote. Should always vote. But if you're going to vote, hopefully you'll be voting for Measure Q, and then hopefully we can get some additional revenue into Lompoc and slowly but surely see us build back towards a higher quality of life than we've had recently. That's what I have. Hopefully that makes sense. Are there some questions? I'd love to answer some questions if you have. So we are constantly looking, you mean in terms of additional resources. So, for example, the reason that we're hesitant to pay for a couple things like a new fire truck or body cams for police officers is we are constantly looking at the American Rescue Plan is one element. That could bring us a lot of recovery funds, and we're trying to find a nexus to COVID recovery so we can use those funds. But to your point, yes, in the infrastructure, that's a new bill that's coming out. The devil is always in the details. So we are waiting for guidance from Treasury. We're waiting for guidance from a lot of our regional and federal leaders so they can educate us on what we might utilize. And again, that's an important element for us to have those relationships with those leaders so that we don't guess and then go spend a bunch of money of our taxpayers on something that the feds could have helped us out with or the state could have helped us out with. So yes, there are additional resources potentially. One of our big challenges, though, is as we take those resources, it's never free, meaning we have to be accountable to that. There's a reporting structure. And on occasion, there are times when we could, on paper, qualify for additional monies, but we don't have the staff or the resources to guarantee that we can report back as they demand and make sure that we don't have to pay that money back. So that's something that we have to be very conscious of. And I'm with you. I'm looking for resources everywhere. I'd rather us find some from the feds and the state before we have to go raise taxes on you. Wherever we can get these resources before we go to you, that's hopefully our goal. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Yes. Yes. So will this become part of the annual operating budget? This tax is a general tax. It's not a special tax. So all of those funds go into the general fund. 80% of the general fund is police and fire. That's public safety. Also in the general fund is our library, parks, planning, a couple other things that are very small in there, but the majority of those things is public safety. So yes, it goes into the general fund and it could go anywhere, but not really. It's up to the council, and it's up to you all to keep us accountable to the goals that this community wants. Do we want to be safer? Keep the pressure on us. We're going to try to figure out how to get the revenue. You guys make sure that we spend it in the right spot and that we do what we said that we'd like to do, and that's build back towards better public safety and higher quality of life. Yes, sir.
Mr. Ball,
Yes, sir.
you recently passed the 1% tax.
Sure.
Brought in over $5 million.
Sure.
We passed the cannabis tax, which initiated the 6% tax, as well as the flat fee tax.
Sure.
It's brought in a couple $1 million.
Sure.
You're seeing more money come in from the cannabis industry as it grows.
Sure.
More doors open, more registers open,
Sure.
more collections.
Sure.
When will we see accountability? As you said,
Sure. Sure.
Are people accountable? Our police department, I can't say they've allowed for 52 shootings to happen.
Sure.
So we've had 52 shootings.
Sure.
We're not even done with the year
Sure.
yet. When are we going to see our money put into
Sure.
action? Because I'm concerned, I don't want to just continue to give money to City Hall.
Sure.
I think that I speak reasonably when I say this.
Sure.
Nobody wants to have an underfunded police department, an underfunded
Sure.
fire department. Nobody wants to have ugly brown cars.
Sure.
Nobody wants to have ugly streets.
Sure.
We want to have peace. We want
Sure.
to have prosperity.
Sure.
So sometimes you got to pay for those things.
Sure.
I understand that.
Sure.
But we're continuing to pass taxes
Sure.
and pay, and we're not
Sure.
seeing a difference in the streets.
Sure.
So at what point in time does the money we're collecting go into the accountability for our city.
Sure. So I appreciate what you're saying there, and I know that you personally are paying part of Measure I, and you may be paying part of the 6% from dispensaries, but correct me if I'm wrong, you don't own a manufacturing operation. So to be very clear, you make a good point. When do we see results? How do we turn the corner on any of these things? Well, it's going to happen slowly, but here's where I would suggest that you consider little incremental growth. Within the next couple months, well, let's just say within the last month and a half, we've had the police department say, okay, finally, we've got just enough bodies, we're going to make a special investigations unit. They're not doing what they used to do with a full-on gang and a drug enforcement and the whole dog and pony show, but they have dedicated officers specifically to go after whatever the top item in the community is. So if gang issues is our number one issue, they are committed and dedicated to that issue. Now, is that alone going to make all the shooting stop? I mean, I don't know how we're going to make that stop overnight, but I will tell you one thing. I've got numbers here where for 10 years, our average homicides between 02 and 11 was 1.4 a year. In 2019, we had 7 homicides. 2020, we had, I believe, 7. Or 4. We've had way too many. I mean, way past any sort of normalcy that we used to have. The other thing is, this is a pet peeve for me. I'm waiting too. I live on Walnut, and I see people going 85 miles an hour down the street and driving erratically and unsafe all over town. When can we see a traffic element? I expect to see that in the next month or two. Now, again, if the only measurement is we went from all of these shootings and homicides to crickets, it's going to take us some time to build back to that level of, hopefully we can get somewhere close to that. For me, again, the cost of doing business at the city is so much higher than it used to be. So I understand that you said no one's against paying them what they're worth, but I do hear a lot of rhetoric in my community of saying, no, they already make too much. Or they, Lompoc isn't big enough to support that. I just respectfully disagree. We have the data, we have the history in our background to show that somehow we weren't that much richer back then, but we took care of business. Was it perfect? No, but we did it. So again, accountability, let's look at what we used to do 10 years ago. My thing is, let's look at the PDF from the annual report, and let's see how the heck did they get 3,000 volunteer hours from our community in supplement to the police department? How do we go from 3,000 to nothing? Well, COVID played a small role in that, but it isn't a priority. So it's up to us to educate you on what we think we can try to go after, what we used to do in the past, and you can put pressure on us to say, look, I'd love for us to do what we used to do in this area, or I'd love for us to change and go in this direction in that area. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Are you ever going to be perfectly happy with City Hall and every decision that they make? I don't know. I'm definitely not. It's challenging. But I do know that it isn't as simple as they make too much or not. It's on paper. We do not pay our city workers, even our administrative and our management. We don't pay them way more than any other city. If anything, we pay them a lot less, and I can show 25, 30% less across the board in many of these positions. On top of that, Lompoc is unique. We should be paying top dollar here. Why? In a perfect world, because we have our own utility system. A lot of cities, Paso Robles, for example, they're paying their city manager $220,000 a year. They took their police chief and made him city manager. He's never been city manager before. And all they have is police and fire and parks. Here, I've got wastewater. I've got all the utilities. I've got electrical. We gave raises to our electric crew. Why? Because PG&E will never catch up. They're paying $200,000 for a lineman to just jump in a truck and go work for them. We just tried to make the gesture because we own our own utility here. That means when the power goes down, we don't just call the blue trucks. We own it. We have to take care of it. But we were bleeding employees over time. So again, I'm saying all this is that everyone else around us has figured out that the cost of doing business has gone up, and they've made adjustments. They passed a sales tax 5 or 6 years ago. We waited 5 years to do it. So again, we're behind on some of those things. But to your point, yes, as we get revenue, there is no reason for us to be status quo. And I cannot commit that everything will become perfect, but if there is no change and there's all these additional resources, I'll be looking for people to fire, because it's up to me too to keep our city accountable, keep them motivated, keep them incentivized. So I do hear you, but I hope that makes sense. And again, if you want to keep us accountable and the city accountable, I brought them with us. It's online too. There's the budget book that we passed. There's the capital improvement project list that we're so far behind on. You can see all of the needs that we have. There's a way to keep us accountable. There's a way to look backwards and see what we used to do in the past. So again, I'm just hopeful that that this makes some sort of sense, that I don't have the perfect answer, Joe. I don't know how quickly we're going to get to the end line. But incrementally, I know we can do a lot better, and that has to be on a quarterly basis in my estimation. So 3 months from now, if there's no movement, there's no anything, there's nothing that's stepping us in the right direction, then I don't feel like we're doing a great job. Long term, we do need to get that extra revenue, and that's going to be next year. So again, we shouldn't be spending the money before we get it too much, but hopefully past April of next year, we'll have additional revenue, and we can make big strategic choices on how to actually make a dent in some of these problems. Does that answer your question enough? I hope. Thank you for that question. Okay, anybody else? Any tough questions, simple questions? Any other things that you'd like to know?
My understanding is it takes anywhere from hire a police officer today.
Mhm.
It takes them 4 years to 2 years to actually get on the street.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
that any way the police department could convince
No. Unfortunately not. There's a lot of federal and state rules that. Yes. So the question was, from the lady's understanding, is it takes sometimes 12 months for an officer, a potential officer, to enter the academy. Eventually, he's on probation. He cannot be, or she cannot be, by themselves. They have to be partnered with somebody. They're in training. And the question was, is there any way to condense that amount of time? And while I'm pretty sure there's not, because there's a lot of regulations on some of those things, and I think for good reason. I'm not a fan of putting a rookie officer out there that with very little experience that accidentally might be a little trigger happy because they haven't been trained and they haven't fully been vetted. I don't know. I think the system is fair. It's just sad to me that the best we can do sometimes is just waiting for 1 or 2 or 3 people to finish the academy. And we're lucky to have them join our department. But again, we're not getting that experienced officer. We're not getting a lateral from another department that's worked really hard, got lots of commendations and rewards. We're starting with newbies. And again, that's fine. But I think it's losing that experience has been a big hit for our community too. So I wish we could make it much quicker. But to that point, I'm hopeful that in a year or two, that instead of our only option being to go put somebody in the academy, is maybe we're pushed by the community to say, why don't we figure out how to offer incentives? Why don't we figure out how to tease somebody to say, look, why don't you come to Lompoc? We'll treat you well here. I think that could be something that we achieve, but again, it's only going to happen with the management of new resources that we pull in. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. So, from what I understand, the Lompoc Democratic Club, which is our left-leaning side of it, and then we've got our local Chamber of Commerce, which is representing our business community. And again, this was 5 people at council. There's been a lot of people in support of this here. I haven't heard much pushback from anyone on this. I've heard some questions, but even from the industry, I haven't heard anyone being against this. Say again? Yes. Central Coast Labor endorsed it as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think who else might have endorsed it. I definitely endorsed it because I'm a big fan of it. I think it should pass, hopefully. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody curious? Other things aside from cannabis or public safety? Anything else? Lompoc? Anything? Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for being here and for hearing me out. And I'm sorry, I think we put probably way too many slides together, but I really just wanted to illustrate that it isn't that easy. We used to be someplace, we have a measurement, and we have a lot of work to get back to some semblance of delivering that level of service that we used to. So I'm hopeful that with additional revenue, we can do good things. As far as the priorities with how we spend that money, it really should be up to you guys. And so I encourage you all to stay involved, and if you can, attend city council meetings. If you can't, watch it online. A lot of stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens. So if you want to know how money gets spent, pay attention. If you're curious to see the budget, we're not hiding anything. It's all online. If you have a question, reach out. I've got my cards here. I'm pretty available. I'll meet with lots of people, even folks I disagree with, because we've got to be on the same page somehow, some way, so that Lompoc can realize its potential, which I think it can. All right? Thank you. Thank you, guys.